Donald Trump brazenly deceived Israel regarding the Gaza Strip, and as a result, Jerusalem refuses to comply with the terms of the American president's peace plan and is preparing to continue the war with Iran without the participation of the United States. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today, on August 9th, publicly rejected Donald Trump's plan for Gaza at a government meeting. The very same plan that the American president called a historic breakthrough back at the end of July. But it turned out that in words, Donald Trump promised Israel the disarmament of Hamas militants. But now he says that the militants should be allowed to keep their weapons. There's no need to eliminate or destroy it, they can just hide it, and the militants can keep it, for example. Personal weapons. Well, a little automatic rifle in the hands of each militant supposedly won't hurt. That doesn't mean they'll immediately attack Israel again. But that's far from the only front where Israel is now going against Washington's wishes. At the same time, the Israeli army is preparing to act independently in Iran. That's exactly why the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, is looking for a way to get out of the war rather than continue it, and without achieving any of the declared goals. In this episode, we'll break down both stories, Israel's direct refusal regarding the Gaza Strip and Israel's simultaneous readiness to act independently of America. Because Trump is clearly trying to get out of the Middle East as carefully as possible. My name is Alexei Pecci. Let's discuss all these topics together. But before we begin, I ask you to check right now if you are subscribed to this YouTube channel. Look at the subscribe button under this video. If you've already clicked it, great, thank you very much. If you happen to watch my episodes but still haven't subscribed, please do it right now. Actually, it's very important. And leave a like in advance. If you don't like it at the end, you can just take it back. So, today, Israel officially rejected the so-called peace plan of Donald Trump for the Gaza Strip, which was developed by the so-called Peace Council. Benjamin Netanyahu said the following today at the government meeting, and I quote, "I want to clarify. Israel rejects the 15-point document. I heard people say, well, you didn't say that. So I'm saying it now, and I'm repeating it again. The IDF, that is, the Israel Defense Forces, will not withdraw troops from Gaza until Hamas truly disarms, and the IDF continues to thwart threats to our forces and citizens." When asked about negotiations with the Americans, Netanyahu replied, quote, "We are currently discussing this with the Americans. They have ideas, some of which are acceptable to us and some are not. And we know how to stand our ground firmly on these issues." And then Netanyahu went even further, uttering a phrase that completely destroys Donald Trump's entire plan for the Gaza Strip. Quote, "As long as I am Prime Minister, a Palestinian state will not be created either in Gaza or in the West Bank." And then, referring to Israel's military actions in Gaza and Lebanon, as well as the strikes on Iran earlier this year, he uttered a phrase that became the main quote of the day. Just listen. Netanyahu declares today, quote, "Contrary to everyone who lectures us, we do what is necessary for Israel's security, and we can and will stand our ground, even against our best friends when necessary." As you can see, this is a direct message to his best friend Donald Trump, saying that if something needs to be done for Israel's security, then Israel is ready to go against even its best friend. Here, I want to send a big hello to everyone who insisted in the comments that Alexei Pecci was completely wrong when he said that there is actually a very tough conflict between Trump and Netanyahu. And when recently, at the end of July, Netanyahu visited Trump, you could really feel the coldness between them. But some Israeli commentators said, no, what are you talking about? It was historic. They agreed on everything. Everything is under control. Netanyahu is on top, and so on. Well, here's your on top. Here's your under control. When we get into this in more detail now, about how Donald Trump's peace council is basically saying, yeah, let's just leave these weapons with Hamas and just, we'll get a promise from them that they definitely, for sure, will never attack again. And the context of Netanyahu's refusal is important because it shows how much the positions have diverged from what Donald Trump publicly announced. Back at the end of July, Trump announced what he called a historic agreement to ensure the disarmament of Hamas and all other armed groups in the Gaza Strip. A month after he first announced the ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel, brokered by the United States. At the same time, Hamas stated that it would only agree to the deal if Israel stopped its strikes on Gaza and withdrew its troops to the so-called Yellow Line, as defined by the October ceasefire agreement. Currently, Israeli forces control more than half of the territory of the Gaza Strip, specifically the eastern and southern parts. And now it turns out that the United States of America is ready to soften the wording of its demands on the terrorist group Hamas, for the sake of starting the process of rebuilding the Gaza Strip. Well, I can admit, and I emphasize, I admit, that Donald Trump may not really care that much about Israel's security. He just wants to start making money on the reconstruction of Gaza as soon as possible. He says, okay, let's soften the wording just to close the issue and finally start making money. Let me remind you, Donald Trump's peace plan, announced in September 2025, was unambiguous. The Gaza Strip will be demilitarized and the terrorist infrastructure will be destroyed. And all means of waging war will be permanently disabled. This is key. Article 13 in Donald Trump's plan reads as follows. All military, terrorist, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapons production facilities, note this, will be destroyed and will not be restored. The process of demilitarization will be carried out in the Gaza Strip, which includes the final removal of weapons through their agreed destruction or dismantling. This is the key point, destruction or dismantling, meaning complete elimination. And then suddenly the United States of America and the mediators started discussing something completely different. Instead of eliminating, destroying, or dismantling Hamas's arsenal, what's being discussed is where Hamas's weapons will be stored and whether they can be transferred to another Palestinian entity. Let's put it this way. The question of where it will be stored and whether it can be transferred, well, in my opinion, that's not the same as destruction or dismantling. In my opinion, this is a question of preserving these weapons. There are even discussions about allowing Hamas members to own personal firearms. So, the issue being discussed is that each Hamas militant would keep his own assault rifle, just to be sure. But initially, Donald Trump's peace plan did not aim to move Hamas's arsenal anywhere. It was about its complete elimination, that is, physically taking the rocket launcher and cutting it up for scrap, taking the assault rifles and destroying them. That's what was meant. Destroying the tunnels, destroying the places where these weapons were produced. The elimination of all of this. But now Trump has changed his mind and says, listen, let's just hide all these weapons somewhere and the whole problem is solved. And here's the question, how did the promise of complete disarmament turn into a discussion about exactly where Hamas's arsenal would be kept? Weapons stored in warehouses are still capable of firing. It doesn't matter where they're kept. Explosives hidden in a warehouse today can be taken out as soon as tomorrow. Undestroyed missile production facilities can resume operations as soon as tomorrow. Tunnels, again, can be reused if they haven't been blown up or filled in. After all, the problem has always been Hamas militants' access to weapons, not where the weapons are physically hidden. It's funny that now this so-called peace council says that the weapons just need to be hidden, and that some foreign peacekeepers will guarantee that Hamas won't get to them. Like, they will guard these weapons, but the question is why? Well, why keep it if the goal is for these weapons to never be used again? And here I'll give you a quote that only proves that the Trump Peace Council simply agreed to Hamas's terms to speed up the process. Shortly after the publication of the new roadmap, a high-ranking Hamas official, Ghazi Hamad, said the following in an interview with the Saudi TV channel Al Arabiya, and here is his quote: The weapons will be stored, not handed over, and this depends on Israel's commitments. We agreed with the mediators to store the weapons, not to hand them over. Our political and civil role in Gaza continues. That means Hamas remains. Hamas has not abandoned its national project to reclaim Palestinian lands. We consider the current stage to be exceptional because of the obligations imposed on the Gaza Strip. I'm translating it into plain language. Even before this process began, Ghazi Hamid said outright, "Listen, we're not going to give up our ideas. We remain in power, and we are going to continue fighting with Israel. It's just that at the moment, let's put it this way. Okay, we'll pretend that we agreed to your terms, and for now, we'll just hand over these weapons for safekeeping. Let them stay here for a while. For a while, we'll act like saints, like good people, show that we can be dealt with, and then we'll just take these weapons back and continue fighting with Israel." And let me remind you that this very Ghazi Hamad once blurted out that Hamas would repeat the events of October 7th more than once. Let's move on. Just a week ago, after Trump and his intermediaries, as well as the Arab countries, initially welcomed the plan as a significant breakthrough, Netanyahu's position already sounded like this. Israel did not sign the deal and therefore does not intend to withdraw troops from Gaza until Hamas is completely disarmed. Hamas, on the other hand, demands the withdrawal of Israeli troops in exchange not for the elimination of weapons, but simply for storing them in boxes. But Israel's open disagreement with Washington concerns not only Gaza, but a much broader issue regarding Iran itself. After the report that the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, is looking for a way out of this war with Iran, and he doesn't believe that a new air campaign will help advance negotiations with Tehran. In Israel that same evening, they began preparing for the possibility of independent actions against the Islamic Republic. General Kane made it clear to President Trump's advisors that Washington needs to find a way out of this war with Iran because the military escalation options currently on the table could lead to the opposite results. And this idea has already been discussed with Trump's group of advisors, including CIA Director John Radcliffe, Secretary of State Mark Rubio, and Vice President J.D. Vance. And so, according to Kane and other members of Trump's cabinet, victory solely through airstrikes is unrealistic, so other options were considered that matched President Trump's own criteria for victory. For example, simply pulling out of this war with a declaration that the United States of America has won, even without a nuclear deal. By the way, it stopped being a requirement, and we talked about this in the previous episode. As a result, it turns out that Israel these days is actually moving on two tracks at once, contrary to or bypassing the position of its main ally. It is rejecting the American plan for Gaza and preparing to act independently against Iran, precisely because it sees indecisiveness and internal contradictions within Washington itself. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and don't forget to like the video. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, I would be grateful. You can do this by donating through the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.